name is Lydia Kostopoulos, and I'm a strategy and emerging technologies advisor with a deep passion for body data tracking and human performance. This set of healthy aging protocol interviews delves into perimenopause, specifically the perimenopause game plan. Such an important life event that women experience requires a game plan, is my thought. And so in this series, I'll be interviewing people to ask them, what is their game plan? How are they going through it? How are they preparing for it? How are they posturing for it? I hope you enjoy these set of interviews. Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your healthy aging protocol and your perimenopause game plan that you had.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So can we start with an introduction? Tell us about you.
Okay. My name is Melissa Davey, and I am 73 years old, and I live in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. So anybody that knows Pennsylvania knows that Valley Forge is where George Washington was and his troops, and it's about 20 miles due west of Philadelphia. So Philly is my city that I go to. I live with my husband, and I have two grown children, more than grown, who have three grandsons for me, and all of those grandsons are now teenagers. So we're kind of spread out here and there. I have a daughter in Vermont, a son here in Pennsylvania, and try to get to see them as often as possible. But sometimes it's a little rough. You wonder what I used to do. I'll tell you what I do now. I'm currently a documentary filmmaker, and that's not something that I was trained to do. In years past, and again, you're talking 7 decades of time on Earth, I was in the nonprofit world for quite a while, about 12 to 13 years, doing legal services work for indigent people. And that's where I became proficient in Social Security disability law. And then I parlayed that into a step further into the for-profit world and into a large national corporation where I built a Social Security representation program for this risk management company, and then became one of their executive level vice presidents, sitting on the company board and running a division that was national in scope. That all happened. That's the short version of my timeline. And then at 65, I started wondering, how long am I going to do this? And it wasn't because the company had an age requirement. They didn't specify that you should retire at a certain point, although 65 is kind of a traditional number that you would hear, an age that you would hear about retirement. I could have stayed forever, but a number of things happened at my age of 65 at work and around me outside that made me sit down and say, wait a minute. What am I doing? Am I going to stay here another 10 years and die at my desk? That was the joke in the office, but I was constantly saying, I don't want to die at my desk. And I think what I was saying was, I want to do more things. I don't want to just do this and then it's over. And that kind of scared me a little bit at 65. So I started doing an inventory of all the things that I had never tried. Like learn to play a saxophone. That was a big one, but I don't read music. And at 65, I thought, that could take me a while. But the one that it kept coming back was make a film or be involved in a film in some way, because I was always curious about the process. And I love film. So I decided, a funny thing did happen that really pushed me. I ended up for a day on the set with famous director M. Night Shyamalan, which I won through his Charity Buzz account that was supporting his education foundation. And so I ended up with him. And at lunchtime, he said to me, what do you do for work? And I was trying to explain this corporate, risk management, Social Security piece. And he looked at me curiously and said, what do you really want to do? And immediately I said, I want your job. And he said, well, you better hurry up. So this was a young man sitting with an older woman saying, you better hurry up. And he was kidding. But it hit, that feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when something really moves you. And it was at that moment I thought, well, he's right. Why wouldn't I better hurry up, because who knows how much time I have left. So that's how it happened. I decided that day, at the end of that day on the set, when I came home, it was, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to make a movie. And
Amazing.
that's how it happened. Yeah, it was really exciting though. It was so, when you're in a job for 25 years and you do it well and you're comfortable and, you lose a lot of times that sense of excitement.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
just the thought of trying something completely out of my realm was so exciting. And I knew I could fail at it. I mean, maybe some people would say I did fail with my first film. I don't know, but it was just so exciting. And and when you get that excited when you're 65, the age doesn't even factor in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing to think about age. It's just, am I going to do this and how will I do this? And by that time at 65, I had enough experience behind me to know what I didn't know, to very easily make a list of what I needed and not have that uncomfortable feeling of reaching out to people that I don't know. Because, I was okay with that at this point. So it was very easy for me to decide to make that change and get moving.
That's really exciting. And the film that you made is about the lives of women after 65, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I really enjoyed that because it reminds us all that there is a lot of life to be lived after 65. So, with that said, I would love to hear about your healthy aging protocol. You said 7 decades. What is your healthy aging protocol?
I mean, the major thing is realizing that the older I get, the more I need to move. So movement is a part of my, daily practice, and it is going to the gym 5 days a week, making that commitment to just do it. And the more I move and the more I strengthen my muscles, the younger I feel and the stronger I feel. And I really believe that that's a huge piece of it. The other piece is eating healthy and, moving to organic foods 99% of the time. If, once in a while you can't find something that's organic, but most of the time that's what we're doing. And most of the time we know, where did the meat come from and where did, these vegetables come from? And we try to buy local as often as possible. So, and a little bit of meditation too. I'm not as good at that as I would like to be, but I use it in a practice almost daily, even if it's for a very short period of time. And I find that it kind of settles me, especially if I do it first thing in the morning. And it kind of sets me off on a, straight path for the day and just feeling calm. I mean, that's my goal in life, is to enjoy it fully and go crazy at times, but to also find this calmness in me so that I have no anxiety. And I think that gets better with age, all the time. It gets better with it. Things are just easier. And things that you used to worry about are not, it's ridiculous to worry about something that you may not have any control over. It's just accepting things around you and, moving forward in a calm fashion. So, that's my protocol, is eat well, get plenty of sleep. I didn't mention that. And that is a challenge as you get older. I think most people will tell you that they don't get a good 7 or 8 hours sleep. And so I work on that as well to make sure that I'm getting as much rest as possible. And hopefully that means that for the next 20 years, I'll be vital. That's my hope, is to stave off any kind of illness or, lethargy or, a reason to want to just sit down, which I don't want to do. I really don't want to just sit down. So.
And well, you can't, because you're already working on another film, which I think is in post production. What was the name of the new film you're working on?
The new film is Climbing into Life. And we're getting really close. We have a lot of work to do this afternoon as well, but we're at the final stages of editing now. And then it will go out for color and sound correction. And then I'll start the push to try to get it out on all the different streaming platforms.
So I could see why the whole movement and eating healthy and getting your sleep is important because you are a producer. So you have to be able to focus and get on with it.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So, but you have also gone through the very big stage in a woman's life, which is menopause. And I'd love to
Hmm.
hear when you were going through the years of hormonal shifts during perimenopause, what was your game plan? Like, how did you deal with that? How did you try to maintain, what was your healthy aging routine in that time?
Yeah. Now we're going back into my 40s. Okay. So this is a while back. And honestly, I didn't have a game plan. If you talk to women way back then and said, "What's your menopause game plan?" they would probably look at you curiously and say, "Well, what do you mean?" I don't know. I'm just in it. So there was sort of, in a way, there's a little bit of burden lifted there because you didn't know you needed a game plan. While you were in it, you kind of wished that you had one, but you had no idea what it might be. And you just accepted the fact that you were a full-time working person, potentially, for me, I was married. I had things to do at home. I was traveling for work all the time. I
Mhm.
traveled all the time around the country. I had staff in different states. And during that time period, I will tell you, it was extremely difficult, but it wasn't something that people sat around talking about like they do today. Like if I sit with a bunch of women today and younger women are in the mix, it will inevitably come up in the conversation, and it's usually a younger person saying, "Well, did you take hormone replacement therapy?" And I say, "No, I didn't. I just grinned and bared it." And maybe that was dumb, or maybe it was good because I didn't fill my body with things that maybe wouldn't have been compatible. But it was very difficult. And again, being a woman in a senior management position in a large corporation, half the people around you are men. It's not something that they would have been comfortable talking about. And I know that because I had to test it a couple of times. And, they were uncomfortable with it. You know, for example, sitting in a board meeting and me having like a raging hot flash, and wearing a jacket and a shirt and all of that. And it felt like it was 120 degrees. I remember I must have gotten red and I pulled off my jacket and one of my colleagues leaned over very kindly and jokingly said, "Oh, look at her. She's having her own private summer." And everybody kind of tittered and laughed. And I thought about it afterwards and I thought, gee, that really made people uncomfortable, especially the men in the room. And
And
nobody
that,
wants to talk about it. Even the women, even the women who were my colleagues, maybe a few years younger than me, were like, "Oh, don't bring that up. That's not really going to happen." Especially one in particular. She didn't even want to hear the word menopause because it aged her. She didn't want to think about her aging process or to be put in that bucket. And I remember thinking, well, that's odd because it's just part of, what we're going through. So did I have a plan? No. And maybe if I had it, this whole menopause thing wouldn't have interrupted my work the way it did, which in a way led me to be creative in how I worked during the time of menopause. Because one of the things that happened to me, which happens to a lot of women, is my periods became horrendous. A lot of clotting
Mhm.
and a lot of heavy, heavy bleeding for years, for years.
Mhm.
And, at one time, the CEO, who's a male, I reported to the CEO, and he and I would travel a bit. And at one point on the plane, I had this, you know, horrible accident with my period on the plane seat and, just hemorrhaging. And I remember leaning to him and said, "Look, You're going to have to deal with this. But when I get up, I need you to put your coat around me because I've got a real problem here. And I remember him just looking at me in shock, but saying, whatever you need. Oh, of course, and this is part of me going to a big meeting with a huge company. And here I am asking the CEO to put a coat around the back of me so people won't see this. And I remember thinking, geez, women go through a lot. Women do a lot. And they keep on, I kept on going to the meeting. I had to go to the hotel, change, do whatever it is that I had to do to be presentable. But it's something that a man wouldn't even think of. There's not too much physically that they go through unless they're sick that would change the way they operated their business on a daily basis. So I get why they might not understand. Maybe they don't have anybody in their life that's going through that, so they haven't seen it, but they also just can't relate to it the way a woman can. So, I look back at those years and I realize those were my highest income producing years. They were my busiest as far as travel and being responsible for hundreds of people, and all of that was happening while the menopause was happening, and it really does play tricks with your mind. You're exhausted, you're anemic. I was anemic because of the blood loss, but you still had to go to work and you still had to perform in a way that was satisfactory to yourself and to the company. Mm-hmm. And so I know so many women who have done that, through this period in time where it was very challenging for them physically and mentally, honestly. So I have a great deal of respect for women that get that far and go through that and still maintain, their A-level production in whatever it is they might be doing.
And like you said, you were going through it during a time where you didn't have as many resources as we have today. And now menopause is a bit in vogue. And there's all kinds of new startups around it and wellness products. And we're starting to understand kind of a bit more about it. And I think that while you didn't have that, you were a pioneer in the sense that you talked to your male colleagues about it and you refused to do this in silence by yourself, which is what a lot of women have done and continue to do today. And like you said, like men don't understand, but women don't understand. But you, in all of that, you were like, I'm going to explain, like, this is what's happening to me. And so in looking back, and you were also an executive, how, if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now, what is the game plan you would have prepared for yourself? What would you have told your younger self? Hey, you need to do this and this and this. What would it have been?
Yeah, I think I would have done, I probably would have met with a couple of doctors who maybe were doing some pioneering work in this to have more discussion with them. I did think I did the research on my own back then. So, and there wasn't a lot available. The wild yam cream, I was trying that. That didn't do a thing. It felt nice and it smelled good, but it didn't do a thing for me. So I probably would have talked with doctors about what can I do to make this a little more comfortable. Is there, maybe hormone replacement therapy would have been good. I don't know. I'm not sure. I did have to have a procedure, a uterine artery embolization to stop the heavy bleeding. I probably would have done, when I look at it now, I would have done it sooner if I had understood how it worked and how it would have helped me have an easier monthly period. Because as soon as I did that procedure, and I think I was 48 when I did that, and then my period stopped at 53. So I only had a few years of, wow, this is what it was supposed to be like. It would have been a lot easier. So I think I would have sought out physicians that might have had a little broader view and maybe specialized in menopause. But at that moment, I didn't know anybody who was claiming to do that. And I think I would have very easily been able to sit down and plan with whoever my superior person was, whoever, in this case, it was the CEO, and just talk about, look, this is my deal. And every month there's probably going to be 1 or 2 days where I have to work from home. And I did get to that with him much later in the process. But I think that those discussions need to happen at work early on, when you have women who are in their 40s to 50s and are going through this process. They need to be able to have a safe place to talk about, look, this is what my monthly view looks like. And there are X number of days where, I might not be able to be here. So let's accommodate that and make sure that you understand I'm not slacking off. I just can't be in the office those days, or, whatever it might be. I think I would have had more conversations with people and and maybe it would be HR or something like that, to try to normalize the conversation and actually support the conversation within the company, especially when you're in a company that has a lot of women.
It's really important. In a company I was at the other year, I went to the head of HR, and while I am far away from menopause, I told him, I said, you need to have a menopause plan for all of the employees who are going through that. And they need to have some sort of like consideration. There needs to be awareness, because I started to read about it and how challenging it can be. And listening to what you are saying, again, like really insisting and talking about it. Now I think that we benefit from post-COVID remote working and flexible working and hybrid work that can really help. And before, you didn't have that. And so you had to say, hey, like, I need this. And now someone can more privately go through that without having to talk about that. But I still think it's important to talk about. And so I want to return back to your surgery, your procedure. I know that after that, you had the laptop at the hospital working. How do we juggle all of these things? And you were already like very vocal. And so like, what could you, if you, like went back, like, I think this is part of a game plan, mustering the courage to say that you are going to have boundaries around to protect your experience in this. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, I can only speak for myself, and then I can speak for what I've observed with other women. But for me, from childhood, I've learned how to be vocal in order to get something that I need, because there were many times that I didn't get what I needed when I was a child. So it made me louder, I think, as I got older, as I got more confident with myself. I was able then to say, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to wait for nothing to happen. I'm going to, go in and have the conversation first and get it started. And that's kind of the way I live my life. But that's not the way most women do, I think, especially when I look in business and women in business. They're still vying for that position against the man. I mean, it's still there. The reality is there that the pay grade is different for a male or female doing the same work. There's still inequality there. Many places have fixed that, but most, I think, have not. So that remains an issue. And I think because of that, women are afraid to speak up. They're afraid to be seen as weak. And if you're afraid to be seen as weak, talking about menopause with your male colleagues or your boss is, probably a feeling of complete weakness. Like, I'm going to, if I'm a woman, I'm going to sit with this man and tell him about my period and how bad it is, and how there's a couple of days a month where, I just can't be here. I mean, that is a very scary position for many women to be in. Especially if they just don't have that feeling within themselves that, that's okay. When they say no, I'm going to continue to tell them my story until they hear me. And not many people are that way. And I had to learn to be that way and learn to manipulate those conversations so that they had a positive outcome for me. but not everybody's capable of doing that, and not everybody's willing to even try to do
Mm-hmm.
that because they're afraid of, what it is that their male counterpart might do or say. But I suppose, women talking about their periods and menopause, and it's not a, really cool thing. Men don't like it. They're very uncomfortable with it. And I've had them tell me that, like, yeah. Like they want to,
But we
they
need
want to
to.
support you, but they don't want to get into a huge discussion about it.
Well, you say you didn't have a game plan, but you were building your game plan along the way because part of it is communicating your boundaries to protect yourself. And that's something that you have
Yes.
done. You found it in you to have those tough conversations because you needed to do that to protect yourself. And you also took those risks as
Right.
well because it is, like you said, uncomfortable to have to talk about it. But I think that clearly was part of the game plan that you had. And something else I wanted to ask you was about your emotional health. Having gone through it, what would you have told yourself to prepare for your younger self?
Oh, oh, be prepared for wild mood swings and not feeling yourself and getting angry about ridiculous things. And, you know, it is an amazing thing when you look back and you see how you reacted to certain situations when you didn't feel good. It must be trying for men. I give that to men where I look at them like husbands or boyfriends or just, male counterparts at work or whatever. It must be hard for them because honestly, the moods can kind of go like this during any given day when you're not feeling yourself. And it takes a strong man and maybe strong connections with one another to be able to get through that, So I would say be mindful of that and definitely talk to men about what it is that you're going through so that they understand that you're not crazy,
Mm-hmm.
but that you're just having a really bad moment. And your mood can change 5 minutes later back to, your happy self. But the mood swings and the headaches and the lethargy and just feeling
Mm-hmm.
blue is real. And I guess I would want my younger self to know that that's okay, that this is part of it. And this part of it can
Mm-hmm.
last a very long time. I mean, it is amazing when I look back and I think of how it started in the early 40s. And it wasn't until I was in my, mid 50s that all this kind of culminated. And so all during that time is the time when I was working the hardest, traveling the most,
Mm-hmm.
having the most responsibility at work and at home. So it was it's a real eye opener for women to have a plan. I mean, I love that work that you're doing in having these discussions about having a plan because we can have them now with younger people and we can help younger women get themselves situated so they understand what's coming. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that now there is much more literature available to women and many more doctors who are you know, um, really spending time researching and doing work around menopause and the effects on women and their daily lives. So, you know, I, I love talking with younger women about this because you can't find too many men that are going to be wanting to sit down with you and have a chat about it. But the younger women are interested. They're fearful. I find that they're afraid, because maybe they've heard things that their mothers or their grandmothers have said about it, and a lot of them poo-poo it like it's a thing you don't talk about, like it's a bad thing. It's part of our body and who we are, and how we exist. But it's one of those things for women where it's really ingrained, even though nobody said it to you, it's ingrained in you that it's something private that you don't talk about, which makes it bad for some people. Like, ooh, it's very uncomfortable. Well, no, it's just a process that you go through every month. And and that ends at some point, thank God, because when it ends, it's awesome. It's like, so it's so freeing. It's like, hallelujah, you know, you have a party. And I remember growing up reading different excerpts from different articles about, I don't feel like a woman anymore, or, you know, that when you lose your period, it's all over and it's all downhill from there. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. So I do remember those things, and I remember thinking about them and wondering, really? You mean you feel different? Well, I will tell you, you feel great, because you never have another period again. You have no cramps, you have no, you know, heavy bleeding or hemorrhaging in my case. And it's so freeing. It's just so freeing to be able to go anywhere and wear white pants or whatever you want to do and not have to worry about it. So, yeah,
Well, you know,
it's
and this
great.
is why I think a game plan is so important because, I mean, every woman's going to experience it differently. But nonetheless, it's not something that you're going to sleep through. And so, preparing, even if you have to like change things on the go, which is completely normal, but preparing is good. And so, as somebody who hasn't started yet, I am interested in hearing how others have gone through it. And I think it's valuable to see the different, just as the different healthy aging protocols, understanding the way that different women have mitigated, managed the many facets of the hormonal transition through perimenopause into menopause. And so there's some women who will be on this set of interviews who are in the middle of it. And it's so valuable to get this perspective, that like the long view out, you know, and looking back.
Yeah.
And you know, you see that it's a great and you're happy, and that's also something important to see, that there is a positive life. And I think that that narrative is slowly changing as we are seeing famous celebrities who are postmenopausal, such as J-Lo, who are living their best life. And you can see that you can
Right.
have stamina and continue to pursue life just as you are.
Yes. Yeah. Only it's easier to pursue it because you don't have that worry of, okay, so that time of the month again, here it comes. I got to get ready. I got to pack my, you know, all my accoutrements I needed at work in order to be able to get through the day. And, you know, I feel terrible today. You know, you have so many fewer bad days. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so freeing. You know, unprotected sex, you're not going to get pregnant. So, I mean, there are so many benefits to all of it. And it should be an exciting process. You know, it's just part of being a woman. And, you know, when I think back to when I was going through it, and a lot of people be, oh, just go get pills and do this and do that. And I was
Mhm.
always thinking about all the women that came before me, before they made the pills. And, and I thought, well, you know, this is just part of life. So you have to figure out how to deal with it the best way that you can. And so that was kind of my MO about not trying to take something to make it all go away. It was, I think I need to ride this through. So I better be vocal about when I don't feel well, I'll explain it to people. If I'm acting a little, you know, different on any given day, there could be a very good reason for it. And I think, and I knew that with, you know, some of my women colleagues who were my age. I mean, I
Mhm.
knew, we all knew when we were having, you know,
Mhm.
our periods or having a bad day. And a lot of times we would all, if we worked together long enough, our periods would sync up. So you would have a number of people
Mhm.
going through some of the same emotional feelings on any given day. And we could laugh about it, most of us. We could laugh
Mhm.
about it, support one another, cover for one another if somebody needed a break, whatever. But
Mhm.
I think really, and you're bringing this to the forefront, conversation needs to be had. It's a normal part of the human female body experience. And most females have jobs, and most females need a plan to work around that job during this time of change. And again, it's those females that are working, they're probably at that point in their 40s to 50s, working at their highest capacity, maybe earning the most that they've made, maybe having advanced in their career. to, a very important role within their company. And so, their work is valued, but in order for them to be honest and real, they have to be able to have these conversations in a safe place. And I think the work being done, like you mentioned, talking to HR, I mean, that kind of stuff is important. And when I think back to the company that I left to become a filmmaker, the HR director, the VP of HR was a woman, and we had conversations all the time. So she knew what I was going through, and she knew what others were going through. And she was very supportive because she would be an ear for people when they were having a bad day, or when somebody wasn't understanding what it was that they were going through and kind of pushing them. She would be there to support them and offer them some kind of guidance in how to have an appropriate conversation with probably a male counterpart.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your healthy aging protocol and your experience in perimenopause, the professional, the personal, all the things. And it was nice to see you reflect on your younger self and like what your game plan would have been, but also like to realize that you did take actions, and you were figuring it out. So thank you so much for taking the time to share all of that.
Oh, I really appreciate it. And I wish you luck with your research and the work that you're doing, because it's really, really important.
Well, maybe you'll do a film about this topic.
Ah, that could be interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Melissa. This series is meant to capture personal stories of individual healthy aging protocols and is for informational purposes only, and it does not constitute providing medical advice or professional services. Those seeking personal medical advice should consult with a licensed healthcare practitioner.